Okay, well, let's go to the manual for teachers. Let's go to page 9. We covered trust. I just want to review it a little bit real quickly. And the section is, what are the characteristics of God's teachers? And first paragraph, or the first section, talks about how we're all vary greatly, and it's vastly different on the outside. But as we progress or advance in this, we become much more similar as far as our characteristics. And then it goes through the 10 characteristics of the teachers of God, and then it has some obvious omissions that it talks about later, because it doesn't use things like love and truth and other things that are inherent within our beingness. So these are characteristics that basically do involve our consciousness as we move through our ego journey here. Trust is the one we covered last week. And we covered it in some pretty good detail, but it's just worth noting again that it's the foundation of all the others. That if we don't have trust in the process, then all the other things have no foundation. That it's just ideas that come and go. So it's the important. And then we talked about stages of trust, the development of trust, on page 10 and 11, and how there appear to be 6 stages of trust. And the first one is we're just basically undoing what we made ourselves as our self-created egos. And then the second one is trying to sort out truth from illusion from our standpoint. And it's really from the ego standpoint here we're trying to do it. We're trying to do it, but the important thing is the intention, that we want to do it. And then the third stage you talk about is a period of relinquishment, where it appears we're giving up things. And in the first stage, it says that there may even be external changes that are necessary, and they're always for good. In the second stage, it says everything's helpful, but what we're trying to sort out is what is more helpful and what is less helpful. And in the third stage of the relinquishment, it can be as if we're asked to sacrifice something, as if we're and of course from an ego standpoint we are. And if that's the only place we're going to dwell, then it's going to be a sacrifice. And frankly, we're not going to do it in this lifetime, or at least at this time in this lifetime. So again, it's the intention and what do we want, and it kind of boils down to there must be a better way. And I think the reason we're all here is because we all are looking for one, and I think by now we all realize there is one, and it's available to us. And then the fourth one is a period of settling down, basically coming up for air and seeing how this applies to everything, and being basically astounded about how it does apply to everything. That there really aren't exceptions if we apply it. And then the fifth one is a little bit of a jolt again, a period of unsettling, where what we were using still was our own thoughts of truth and illusion, still. Our own separation of what's helpful and not helpful. And this one says, you'll find that they weren't really clear on what truth and illusion are, because we cannot see the whole picture from what we've just gone through. So we have to basically turn it all over to the Holy Spirit, or to Jesus, or to Christ, or the God Self, or however we want to look at that. And it's asking for this to be done completely, and there the idea of sacrifice will pop up again. And the final one, which calls it a period of achievement, is where the learning is consolidated. And from here, it's just a short step out of the dream. And this is the area that they term of mastery, or that some of the Eastern religions might have referred to as mastery as well. So those are the stages. That's the foundation. That's about trust. Any thoughts before we leave that and move into the next one here of the characteristics, the honesty?
I'm reminded of the story I read years ago about take a glass that's got a bunch of dirt in the bottom of it, and you start pouring clear water into that. And the first thing that happens is you got a glass full of dirty water. Everything is unsettled. But if you keep pouring the clear water into it, it eventually becomes pure water. That's kind of, I think, what you just explained.
That would be a good way to look at it as well. Yeah, I think so. It's the idea that it talks about how if you keep chipping away at it, each chip makes a difference. And from my perspective, it slightly shifts each timeline. Each time I don't do the same thing I used to do from an ego standpoint, I shifted a little bit into another timeline. And of course, every timeline is seamless, just as the one we are in is seamless. But we don't wake up with the same body every morning. If we did, we'd never get out of the fetal position. It all changes. The timelines change all the time. So the question then becomes, if it's going to change, can I influence it from a standpoint of intention? And if I can, how do I want that to be? How do I want to influence it? What do I want to see? Is there a world that the Course calls the real world to replace the one I see? And is it something I really want? And how do I imagine I want it if I can't really imagine what it's like? So it's going to take these incremental steps where we ask for help from the Holy Spirit or from the source that we would rather use, the terminology. It's going to all go to the same place anyway, in my opinion, is if we learn that we get the reinforcement, if we ask it in a certain case, then that's an indication that I don't know what the real world is, maybe, but I know this position is better than the one I was in before I got the help. And so we know we're making progress. Anything else on trust before we move to honesty? So, this one, let's go ahead and, Patty, you want to read that first paragraph?
Mm-hmm. Honesty. All other traits of God's teachers rest on trust. Once that has been achieved, the others cannot fail to follow. Only the trusting can afford honesty, for only they can see its value. Honesty does not apply only to what you say. The term actually means consistency. There is nothing you say that contradicts what you think or do. No thought opposes any other thought. No act belies your word. And no word lacks agreement with another. Such are the truly honest. At no level are they in conflict with themselves. Therefore, it is impossible for them to be in conflict with anyone or anything. Let me keep going.
Yeah, go ahead and finish it up.
The peace of mind which the advanced teachers of God experience is largely due to their perfect honesty. It is only the wish to deceive that makes for war. No one at one with himself can even conceive of conflict. Conflict is the inevitable result of self-deception, and self-deception is dishonesty. There is no challenge to a teacher of God. Challenge implies doubt, and the trust on which God teachers rest, secure, makes doubt impossible. Therefore, they can only succeed. In this, as in all things, they are honest. They can only succeed because they never do their will alone. They choose for all mankind, for all the world and all things in it. for the unchanging and the unchangeable beyond appearances, and for the Son of God and his Creator. How could they not succeed? They choose in perfect honesty, sure of their choice as of themselves.
There is so much in these two short paragraphs. So let's go to the first paragraph first. And it's about, I've read through this a lot of times. But come in. We've got a chair up here. We might want to bring it
Kristen's
back.
coming also. We have two. We can squeeze the two of us.
We have two chairs.
Yeah, there's a chair there. Sit there.
We should slide this way.
Where's nobody? Tristan.
Oh, he's got his chairs.
One in one corner, one here. Okay, sure.
Can you do that?
One on each corner. Here's his book. Take that.
Sorry, we'll start over from the beginning for you.
Oh.
Hey, Ron?
Yeah, no page one. No.
This is the course of
Please take
It
notes.
is a required course. Only the time you take it.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're in the Manual for Teachers, and we're on honesty on page, it starts on page 11, and we've just read through those two in the Manual for Teachers. So I've read this and I've read it, but as I really got into it this time, I'm not sure Hi Tristan, join us.
Got a seat for you right there.
Oh, cool.
We've got a couple new members also. We've got Keith and Barbara, who Keith is
Hi.
Kat's brother and sister-in-law. This is Nicole, and this is her son Tristan.
Wonderful. Nice to meet you.
So again, we're on page, starting on page 11. We've just hit the idea of honesty in the Manual for Teachers, and we've just read through the two paragraphs. And I was saying that this is, in reading it this time again, I realized I had a flawed idea of what honesty is based on this. Honesty seems to be telling the truth. Well, we're still finding out that we probably don't know what the truth is on the basis of the overall picture. The other thing is, when it says, there is nothing you say that contradicts what you think or do, no thought opposes any other thought, no act belies your word, and no word lacks agreement with another. Now that's my whole life right there, just exactly what I Such are the truly honest. At no level are they in conflict with themselves. Therefore, it's impossible for them to be in conflict with anyone or anything. How many times have we've heard people criticize someone or done it ourselves and say, I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
No offense here, but you want me to be honest, don't you? I'm being honest. And how honest are we with ourselves? And how much would we like it if somebody else turned the tables and said, okay, now I'll be honest with you. It's a strange way that we've used the word honesty and how we look at it.
Perception.
Yes. So I recommend that for us to get a better understanding of honesty, that we watch CNN and Fox and see what honesty really is with our political situation. Because then we'll understand what honesty...
No conflict.
No, I'm not really going there, but I did. This is a good example, though. What would it be like if people had no conflict between what they said and what they do? That's what this paragraph just said. What if there was no conflict with what they thought and what they do? I think we've got new people coming in that do that. And it's going to be very interesting to look. Because I know the younger people do that. They don't always say what's on their mind, especially if it's going to hurt someone else. But often they know what's on their mind. And I'm going from our son and daughter and son-in-law and others and their friends. They are of a different mindset. We're used to saying one thing and believing something else. And it's one thing not to hurt someone's feelings, because a lot of things don't need to be said. But it's another thing to simply lie, because we think we're doing the right thing. When it says nothing's in conflict, there's a section in the Course that talks about conflict comes out from two sources. One is when your will says you want to do something, but then in another situation that you can compare it to, your will says you want to do something else. So it's a conflict within your own mind. There's another form of conflict where your will wants to do one thing, but conventional wisdom, whatever you want to call that, the norm says you should do something else. And you could do that something else, but you would be in a terrible state of conflict with your own will. So it's willing two different things is one form of conflict and being dishonest with yourself. And willing one way and doing another way that you don't want to do, that is another way to be in conflict with yourself. What it's talking about here is there's never any conflict in what you are, what you will, what you say, and what you think.
I got this email last night that's pretty similar to what you're saying. Practice love every day and watch your thought, and watch your tongue and watch your deed, that nothing contrary to love finds expression there.
Nothing what?
Contrary to love.
Contrary to love, yes. Okay, thank you.
It's from Scott. He sent it to me last night. It's a quote from Emmett Fox.
So that's beautiful, because it brings us down to what can align what we think with what we will, or what we want to do with what we will, if we come from that place of
unconditional love.
As Linda likes to remind us often when she's here, no matter what the question, love is always the answer. If that's the case, then conflict is impossible only if that is our will. If that is just our conventional wisdom, but our will doesn't want to go there, in a specific case, we're still in conflict.
There's a saying I heard years ago that's always stuck with me. To know and not to do is not really yet to know. So like you said, you got the wisdom, but if you don't live it, you don't really know it yet.
Or if you have what you think is the wisdom and you do live it, but it's not really what you want to do, it's not your will, then maybe there's a problem with that wisdom. We get this idea a lot of times that we do learn things, but then we start relying on that wisdom, not recognizing it's ingrained in our egos, and we don't open the door for a greater wisdom to come in. The second paragraph, the peace of mind the advanced teachers of God experience largely due to their perfect honesty. It is only wish to deceive that makes war. No one at one with himself can even conceive of it. It's a result of self-deception, and self-deception is dishonesty.
Well, if there is only one, who are you in conflict with?
You know, that's the crux of the whole course.
Yeah.
But the one looks a lot different, it seems, to us.
Self-deception.
Yeah. And there's where the idea of the unconditional acceptance comes into play. And this is why, again, I keep going back to Jim's relationship with that, because it is key, the unconditional acceptance.
Yeah.
When we have that, now again, for me, it's not a unconditional advocating for everything as being positive. It's a unconditional acceptance and turning it over and saying, here, this is what I see. There's only one way I can not judge this, and that's if I give it to you. If I don't give it to you, chances are I've already judged it. It's already done. So honesty, can we honestly see a world where honesty is the norm? Because if we can't imagine it, it's going to be hard for us to bring it into our existence. If our perception is, our projection makes perception. Our perception makes projection. I guess they both work that way. If what we perceive is what we've projected out, can we project out a world of the kind of honesty that this is talking about?
I think we can, but we have to be willing to not know. And that's a place, if you do that in school, you'll get in trouble. You got to know, right?
It's uncomfortable.
Yeah. But if we say, I don't know, then at least we haven't condemned it. And whereas knowing is always some form of condemnation, because whatever you know, it condemns what you don't think is right. So I think this learning to live in not knowing is maybe the pathway home. I don't know.
I think if you equate that with not judging, then what we've done, what this first paragraph is saying, is my mind is not in conflict, is not conflicted with anything I think, say, do. It's all in order. And it doesn't change outside of time. But I think you have to be in that place of being willing to not know, to not judge, to just accept and pass it through. It sounds very impersonal, and I think it is. Because our personalities are all in conflict at some level.
That's the whole, everything needs to be impersonal. Mm-hmm. When we make it personal, that's where the conflict comes up.
There's a simple song that kind of talks to that. Show me the way to go home.
Yeah.
Oh. It sounds like such a simple song, and yet if you look at it, at the depth that it's possible to see, show me the way to go home. I'm tired. I don't know what the rest of it is, but
And I want to go to bed.
And I want to go to bed. There you go.
About an hour ago.
And it went right into my head.
So, Tom, you were going to...
I was just keen on what Jim was saying. Yeah, I think that, and what Dan's saying too, the personal aspect, the not knowing of all that I've learned, because I think there's when I can quiet enough, I can get to the place of knowing. And I think because they're hopefully the Holy Spirit, when I truly have trust.
There you go. That's what I was just going to...
And this honesty is based on the final element of trust.
Right.
And when I have that complete certainty in God, that of course talks about.
You have perfect trust that there is something that does know, that is available to come through you.
And so now I don't have to have, it's no longer personal.
Right.
Because the personal is quiet, it is resting. And there I slip into a different realm.
And that's beautifully put, because we're not attacking the personal. it's just not necessary for where we're at right now.
The personal is built on the doubt. I don't trust enough, so I need to have my own tool bag in place, just in case the shit gets you know. And so that keeps itself going, and it challenge implies doubt. Well, the ego, the personal self, lives in doubt. I mean, it perpetuates the doubt. So I don't have complete trust.
That's, yeah.
And then, not God's will, I have to have my will. I have to have my tool bag, just in case. I'm just going to, so trust is foundational.
Just in case God screws up.
And it's, in my perception, that probably happens all the time. My perception.
Because our perceptions are knowing the things that the ego perceives, that it knows.
All I'm doing is projecting my doubt.
Exactly.
My perception is just the doubt.
What you have already within is all you need to know.
Yeah. And so
Because undoing all the stuff that we think we know is the whole key.
Well,
to
there's also the idea of knowing and not being.
bingo.
In other words, if I know that love is the right way and I'm not being loving, I mean, that's about as hypocritical as anyone could ever get.
That's not really knowing.
Yeah, it's not knowing at
It's
all,
very
is it?
superficial.
Yeah.
It's
That's
not.
the quote I had. To know and not to do is not really yet to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an automatic conflict setup right there.
Yeah.
I depersonify it and say, how would love respond? How would peace respond? How would joy respond to this? And by taking it away from people and giving it a characteristic of love, which all those things are, then I can see it.
Or characteristic of God, which all those things.
Yeah, of God too also. But I can then see that I don't have to know the right way, but I have to know how to ask to be shown the right way. That's good enough for me.
And if you can couple that with a catalyst that reminds you to ask, instead of finding out after the fact that, oh, I could have maybe before getting into that situation that way, maybe just stepped back and said, help.
Well, I think as I learn more, I'm more inclined to say I don't know than I've ever been before. And there was a time when I knew it all. Not necessarily correctly, but I knew it all. And
This is where you go to get your answers to questions.
and so by not knowing, what does that really mean? If you looked at not knowing, it means open.
Yeah, it does.
That's where we want to be.
Right.
So in not knowing, we can be shown love in every situation.
When I shared 3 weeks ago, with the going to the hospital and everything, and that night, when I yelled out, I don't know how to be perfect, I don't know how to be all these things, and I cried all night. But I felt God's arms around me, and I felt the angels were with me. I felt totally protected. And from that moment, other things have come to my awareness of old beliefs that are really just going away. One of them that I just happened, and I'm doing some coloring now with this, showing how the light, my heart is opening and the light is shining, is from the time I was 5 years old, I always had one buddy. I grew up with a girl, and she was my best friend all through high school. And then that relationship, when I moved away and all that. And then I went into a marriage. And that was my relationship that I gave and, So there's always been one individual, either a man or a woman, a friend, who has been my rock. And now I look at everyone is my rock. There's only one, and when we're all in this together, and I'm not alone, and I'm not, everybody's there to help me if I need something, and it's a whole different feeling. I'm trusting that guidance, and so more and more is coming through.
And you are perfect. You don't have to be perfect.
Well,
You
that's the
already
spirit
are.
part, I know. But the ego,
Yeah.
letting go of the ego, that's what these old beliefs and things have been. And I can see them now. So I'll read something and I'll say, yeah. There is a knowing and there's a trusting in this whole process.
Well, let's take a look at paragraph 2 there, at the last couple sentences. God's teachers rest secure. Wait a minute. There it is. There is no challenge to a teacher of God. Challenge implies doubt, and the trust in which God's teachers rest secure makes doubt impossible. Therefore, they can only succeed in this, as in all things, they are honest. And then it's interesting because it says they can only succeed because they never do their will alone. They choose for all mankind, for all the world, and all things in it, for the unchanging and unchangeable, beyond appearances, and for the Son of God and His Creator. How could they not succeed? They choose in perfect honesty, sure of their choice as of themselves. Beyond appearances, and they choose for the Son of God and His Creator. Now, how could that be possible? This is in the section of honesty here.
Because we're all one.
We're connected to that which is all one.
Yeah.
And we're not choosing alone.
Right.
And we're choosing with that. And ultimately as that. And so it's going to be for the whole world. Because we're connected with that which is everything.
I think that's really a strong argument for getting rid of all the negativity in our lives. Because it's not only affecting me, it's affecting everybody. If I could respond with love to everything like we've been talking about, that would be helpful to everybody.
I think a key part of that phrase is the unchangeable beyond appearances. Because I think that that's how we choose in honesty, and we don't judge, is when we look beyond appearances. When we turn it over and do not see what the appearance seems to be.
So doesn't it imply we're looking right through the characters in the play, including ourselves in the mirror, to the actor behind it who is one with all others?
He's just another actor like ourselves. He's just got a different role.
Right.
So how could we not love him?
It's interesting because in the beginning speaks of honesty having really to do with consistency. And another word that comes to mind for me often when I read that passage is the word integrity. That's what true integrity is when everything is in alignment in one's being. But it says the word consistency, and the kind of honesty we're speaking about now in the last couple sentences that were spoken is seeing what is consistent throughout. What is consistent throughout, no matter where we look, is the presence of God. No matter who's standing in front of us, that sense of oneness, that sense of beingness, that presence in each one that makes us all one is the consistency throughout. God is the only thing that is consistent throughout. Everything else is changeable. and shifty.
And-
I find that interesting because it comes back to consistency once again, the honesty part. 'Cause
And the consistency, again, I think ties right back into that word love. That is
Yes.
the glue that holds everything together. That is the consistency.
So I've got a poem here, I think that's apropos to this, if I can find it. God is. They say that death is going through God's other door, but we keep living on while the body is no more. We say God is, and then we cease our speaking. For we have found God's presence, and we can stop our seeking. And if everything that's real is very truly Him, then the light of this false reality is very truly dim. We say God is, and then we speak no more, for this is the true reality at its core. Nothing real can be threatened, and nothing unreal exists. And it's this great truth that the ego's world resists. Herein lies the peace of God that we've been seeking. Again, we say God is, and then we cease our speaking. There's nothing but God.
So any other thoughts on the honesty section before we move on? Okay, we'll go to tolerance here. We'll see if we can.
The first sentence is a bang.
Yeah. It's funny, it's called tolerance, but it seems to be talking all about judging. Kat, would you like to read that?
Tolerance. God's teachers do not judge. To judge is to be dishonest, for to judge is to assume a position you do not have. Judgment without self-deception is impossible. Judgment implies that you have been deceived in your brothers. How, then, could you not have been deceived in yourself? Judgment implies a lack of trust, and trust remains the bedrock of the teacher of God's whole thought system. Let this be lost, and all learning goes. Without judgment are all things equally acceptable, for who could judge otherwise? Without judgment are all men brothers, for who is there who stands apart? Judgment destroys honesty and shatters trust. No teacher of God can judge and hope to learn. Well, there's a lie in there.
It doesn't leave us a lot of space, does it? It just kind of nails us right
You notice
there.
there's only one paragraph to that one, tolerance.
Wow.
I think without judgment are all men brothers. That's not a question, that's a statement.
It is, yeah.
Well, to me, I highlighted, without judgment are all things equally acceptable,
Yeah.
for who could judge otherwise? Can you imagine living as all things are equally acceptable? Oh, war, yeah, bring it. Oh, peace, bring it. You know, oh, death, bring it.
Well, it says all things are equally acceptable, but the whole paragraph is about not judging.
Yes.
So to me, it means along those lines. I'm going to go to lesson 14, I think it is. Yesterday's lesson. Because that's a key issue here on what it means to judge and what it means to be acceptable. Let's see. Let's go ahead and read through this. We'll spare Keith and Barbara from reading. So Tom, just go ahead and read through this lesson if you don't mind. At least we'll read to down through paragraph 5.
God did not create a meaningless world. The idea for today is, of course, the reason why a meaningless world is impossible. What God did not create does not exist. And everything that does exist exists as He created it. The world you see has nothing to do with reality. It is of your own making, and it does not exist. The exercises for today are to be practiced with eyes closed throughout. The mind-searching periods should be short, a minute at most. At most, do not have more than 3 practice periods with today's ideas unless you find them comfortable. If you do, it will be because you really understand what they are for. The idea for today is another step in learning to let go the thoughts you have written on the world and see the Word of God in their place. The early steps in this exchange, which can truly be called salvation, can be quite difficult and even quite painful. Some of them will lead you directly into fear. You will not be left there. You will go far beyond it. Our direction is towards perfect safety and perfect peace. With eyes closed, think of all the horrors in the world that cross your mind. Name each one as it occurs to you, and then deny its reality. God did not create it, and so it is not real. Say, for example, God did not create that war, so it is not real. God did not create that airplane crash, so it is not real. God did not create that disaster specified, and so it is not real. Suitable subjects for the application of today's idea also include anything you are afraid might happen to you or to anyone about whom you are concerned. In each case, name the disaster quite specifically. Do not use general terms. For example, do not say God did not create illness, but God did not create cancer or heart attacks or whatever may arouse fear in you.
That should be good.
Wow.
So the idea of total acceptance to me is paired with non-judgment. Non-judgment acceptance does not mean to me, or the way I read this, that everything is acceptable, therefore it must be good in God's eyes. We're talking about the difference between truth and illusion, and my inability to judge, to not be able to judge between truth and illusion. Accept everything and give it over to the Holy Spirit to say, here, I don't know what this means. Is this real? And what this is telling me, well, God did not make that war, and it is not real. This is what this is the core of why we're here and why we picked up this book however many years ago. Is either this world is real according to our egos, or it isn't. If it isn't, there must be another one that is. That's what we're being told. So it's the idea of total acceptance, to turn it over. Because if we refuse to accept that we see a war going on, then we become fearful of that. It's pushing it out, and what we push away is fearful. So, no, I accept what I see. But the Course tells us nothing the body's eyes see is real in Christ's vision.
Nothing I see means anything.
Doesn't mean anything.
So I turn it over and I say, it's yours.
And Tom, and therein lies that fundamental basis of trust.
It does. Exactly.
And so, and the deeper that maturity of the trust, the greater that ability to rest in that not knowing.
Our bank of all those little times we did trust and we found it moved us out of fear. And another time, and it moved us out of fear. And it moved us, eventually it's going to move us out of the illusion.
So would not accepting an illusion be just an illusion of accepting?
No?
You gotta like that.
And that's the catch or the dog.
Okay, I'll change my mind. Yes. but only in the sense that the Course tells us that the replacement or the real world is itself an illusion to replace the one we made. Because we could not go from here to here without having some reconciliation of all the horrors of this world. And so we're given a replacement world, which is called the real world. And it goes to great lengths throughout the Course to tell us we're not going to be stuck there. That's a stepping stone. That's a stepping stone we move beyond as well. To knowledge, which it doesn't try to go into an explanation very deeply about what knowledge is, except it is impersonal when we get there. Yes?
If I could go back to judgment for a minute. Tom Carpenter, about 4.5 years ago in this room, said, "Here come the judge," you know. And that just struck me, and I went home and wrote this poem, "Here come the judge." Remember Flip Wilson, huh? "Here come the judge, here come the judge. From his position he will not budge. Defend, defend," he roars and he bellows, as he cries out against all of his fellows, filled with arrogance and righteous bluster, with all the rage that he can muster. "Defendant, give me your plea, for I am busy, can't you see? Guilty, says he, as he bangs down his hammer. You're hereby sentenced to life in the slammer. But justice must be done if I am to have any more fun. But my safety lies in being defenseless, in spite of the judge's harsh intenseness. The judge is the ego, and he never lets up. For criticism and blame are what fills his cup. And he can only be ousted from his position by bringing forgiveness to its fruition."
I love that you mentioned that from that lesson, in my defenselessness, my safety lies.
Yeah.
And that reminds me of where you go with the trust, bringing up the trust and the trust deepening, and the deeper the trust, the way I experience it is like a deepening of relaxation. And the deeper the relaxation, it's like an absence of judgment, more and more. There's just less and less judgment. It's not like this trying not to judge, because there's still judgment happening there, but it's more like things are just relaxed. And
Peace.
And it can be around the simplest things. And I'm not saying I never judge anymore, but it seems so much less often. And I guess that's noticed more by how relaxed I am versus tense or anxious about things because of some ideas swimming about how they ought to be or so. But it reminds me of things even like little things that doesn't occur to me until I reflect on them as they're being said or happening. Like Tristan and I finally found our own place to live and moved in there on the 1st. And it's the first time in probably 25, 30 years I don't have laundry. I don't have my own washing machine and dryer in the place. You know, we have to go to the laundromat. And I just, well, that's okay. I mean, we like the place. It's the right price. It's the right a lot of things. And so we just moved in there, and the neighbor's talking to me about the laundry and the laundromat. And her and then another neighbor came in. Oh, yeah. And I said, yeah, so it's the first time in a long time I don't have a washing machine. I have to go to the laundromat. And that's kind of, and I just paused. I was just being with it, you know, like realizing it kind of in the moment. Oh, yeah, we have to go. And they both looked at me and said, yeah, like you just kind of, it sucks. And I was like, and it's just awful to have to go over there, isn't it? And I said, well, I don't know. That wasn't my thought. I wasn't ready for it to suck at all. You know, like I don't know what I told. I don't know. Maybe I'll enjoy being over there at the laundromat with all my clothes washed. But it was so interesting. I thought maybe that's the normal thought about if you have to go to the laundromat.
You know, that's
but
a really good example.
For it to suck, it didn't occur to me.
It's a real good example how our expectations creep in, and that breeds immediately automatic judging.
Yeah.
Because if our expectations are not met, we're judging against what happens. Mm-hmm.
And without the contrast of someone else bringing those other opinions into view, there wouldn't have been the realization that, well, there was no judgment happening here. Right. I was just going to go to the laundromat and whatever. I mean, there was no...
And it's kind of an example of how all minds are connected and how we influence each other. And how we don't have to go where things are going. We have,
Right.
we
don't have to jump in that stream, in
and
that river.
interesting that you were in that moment and recognized where you were in the moment, because that's not always easy to do. Instead of just going,
Yeah.
oh yeah, I guess that would suck, wouldn't it, or something, you know.
Yeah, no, I had a really different response, and they looked at me a little odd, but that's okay. It was okay, you know.
This friend of mine said he went to the laundromat last week and there was somewhat pretty lady there with no clothes on.
And you said, which laundromat?
Then he saw the sign on the wall that said, please remove clothes before leaving.
Okay.
So, on that note, I will use tolerance. Okay.
This is the first time I haven't missed Sam.
Well, anything else on tolerance and judgment? Interesting that the heading of it, the characteristic is tolerance, and all the words in it are judgment.
Judgment, yeah, right.
Okay, we'll move to gentleness then. Betty, if you'd like to read, go ahead and read the whole section on
Okay.
gentleness.
Gentleness. Harm is impossible for God's teachers. They can neither harm nor be harmed. Harm is the outcome of judgment. It is the dishonest act that follows a dishonest thought. It is a verdict of guilt upon a brother and therefore on oneself. It is the end of peace and the denial of learning. It demonstrates the absence of God's curriculum and its replacement by insanity. No teacher of God but must learn, and fairly early in his training, that harmfulness completely obliterates his function from his awareness. It will make him confused, fearful, angry, and suspicious. It will make the Holy Spirit's lessons impossible to learn. Nor can God's teacher be heard at all, except by those who realize that harm can actually achieve nothing. No gain can come of it. Therefore, God's teachers are wholly gentle. They need the strength of gentleness, for it is in this that the function of salvation becomes easy. To those who would do harm, it is impossible. To those to whom harm has no meaning, it is merely natural. What choice but this has meaning to the same? Who chooses hell when he perceives a way to heaven? And who would choose the weakness that must come from harm in place of the unfailing, all-encompassing, and limitless strength of gentleness? The might of God's teachers lies in their gentleness, for they have understood their evil thoughts came neither from God's Son nor his Creator. Thus did they join their thoughts with him who is their source, and so their will, which always was his own, is free to be itself.
Isn't it amazing how much they pack into a few paragraphs in this manual for teachers?
Limitless streak of gentleness.
Can we see?
Strength of gentleness.
Can we see how the idea of gentleness and harmlessness is powerful?
Mm-hmm. It's love and expression.
Defenselessness.
And defenselessness.
Right. To be gentle is to be totally defenseless.
But don't we have to go with the implication that if we're going to be totally defenseless and totally gentle, that at some level we must be totally invulnerable?
Yes. Yes.
And that's where the power of the gentleness and the harmlessness come in. It is only if we feel we can be harmed ourselves that a defense is made. If we know without a doubt that our reality is totally invulnerable, then we would have no reason to defend ourself.
The ego would no longer have a job.
The ego would no longer have a job. Because that is, as you've been told by the ego, and you've had conversations with it, which I think is still astounding the way you do that, is that that is the function of the ego.
Is protection.
Is protection. And it makes sense in an evolutionary way, in a progressive way, is we're coming in thinking that because we appear to have our consciousness in a body, that we are a body, then the ego is the protection system for navigating a world of other bodies that don't understand the idea of defenselessness and harmlessness. So it is a protective device, and it has worked that way for us. And there is no reason in my mind to condemn the ego. And though the Course's language seemed to condemn the ego all the way through, it never explicitly ever says that.
No.
In fact, it
That
talks...
would be acting like the ego could actually harm us, and it can't.
Right, exactly.
Disregard. It says disregard.
It will be left behind due to lack of interest.
Yeah. Well, it's like no magnetism. It just doesn't, there's no magnetism anymore.
It will have fulfilled its function. Interestingly enough, in the clarification of terms, it talks about the ego, and it doesn't really do a good job of explaining what the ego is there, because it'd be difficult when it's called the ego an illusion all the way through, and then trying to explain what it is. But what it does talk about is what the ego is not, and it's not love, and it's not oneness,
Peace, joy.
right? All those things. But it says this is where what replaces it now. The miracle is where the ego was, and it talks about what the ego was. It talks about it in past tense, in a way giving some credence to the idea that it was necessary for this journey through separation. But the whole point of this is, at some point it's no longer necessary, and that point is now. And we can, as Patty has not had the negative relationship with her ego as I have had with mine. And so she has this conversation with her ego that is not fearful to the ego, because she's not condemning it. And so the ego, in a sense, is much more frank with her. And it's been a very interesting conversation. She's read some of that in class here often.
It's like, the story of the Wizard of Oz. I told you about it here before. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but when Dorothy finally gets to the Emerald City, and there's the Wizard of Oz pulling all the levers, smoke and mirrors and everything, trying to make everything appear real, she says, "You're a very bad man." And he says, "No, I'm not a very bad man." So there you are. The ego is not a bad being. I'm not a very bad man. I'm a very bad wizard. And then the voice told me that the ego is a wizard and he's not a very good one, and don't follow him. But it doesn't say he's bad. It just says he's a poor wizard.
Well, I think it's helped me in talking to Patty about it, in the idea of not being so hard when I find myself being an ego, as to condemning myself, because now I've associated myself with this ego thing. And so to disassociate that and then still say, but that wasn't a bad thing, we could all probably come up with ideas where, that just, without the ego, that wouldn't have happened. Now, doesn't mean that the ego is a positive thing? Depends on your perspective of the whole thing. If this journey was necessary at all, there apparently was a place for the ego within it, is the way I want to look at it.
Since there was the ego in it, and God is perfection, then we can go with the idea that then there's a place for the ego. But the journey is to rise above the ego, above that me and not you, to me as you as me. And that's where we're all heading, I'm pretty sure.
I think there's something to do with how each of us has this path that we create our world. I have just a short story that I think is interesting, that is letting me see that my ego is no longer so predominant, even as life gives us what we need, whether we know it or not. So like, I spent 28 years in the fire service, always riding to the rescue, always having to be helpful, and on and on and on. Well, a couple of years ago, maybe 3, my neighbor fell going down a bank, shattered his femur. I was home. And he was out there yelling for help. I didn't hear him because my house is so well insulated. So his dog finally went and got someone to get him, I mean, amazing, the dog was the hero, And I'm in my living room, and all of a sudden all these ambulances and stuff show up. And it's so like, okay, I wasn't supposed to be there. I didn't have to ride to the rescue. It was a case where my ego did not get a chance to be enhanced by me saving this guy. 2 years later, his wife, rest her soul, passed away one morning. I mean, this guy has terrible luck. But I was not there again. All this is happening a block away. And I'm going, okay, why wasn't I there to save? Had I been there, I probably could have saved her life because the people got there too late. But I wasn't supposed to be. And so like now, I'm realizing I always had to be the helper. Now I have another neighbor who he keeps asking me to do things for him, which is fine, but now he's beginning to see me as this, fix-it guy to help with whatever he needs. So finally yesterday I said, hey, you need to do some of this stuff for yourself. So again, I'm seeing that instead of my ego pushing me into these situations where I'm helping, I think there's some benefit in that. I no longer have to be the savior. So life is making me see now that I don't have to be that guy anymore. Those 2 big incidents sort of started to wake me up, that you don't necessarily have to be all things to all people all the time, because all that does is make me feel really good about myself.
Well, and the flip side of that, I think, Dan, is that if you, from the ego standpoint, if I don't help them, I should feel guilty.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the one. That's the real issue that you're leaving behind, isn't it?
Yeah. Bingo. Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah. There would have been guilt had I not. Now I'm feeling okay about it.
Right.
So there's.
It's also showing you it's showing you that you don't have to be, but it's even more than that. It's showing you aren't.
Right, exactly.
You aren't all things all
exactly. And that's a really great,
Isn't that awesome?
real great realization.
It's so great. What a freedom.
I don't have to be this whatever I think I thought I was.
Well, our value doesn't depend on what we do.
Exactly.
That's a tough lesson to learn.
And I didn't, like, for 28 years, that was who I was.
Yeah.
I'm not that guy anymore.
That was your identity.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
not now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's been, the life has given me those opportunities to see that. So that's pretty good stuff, I think.
Before we leave gentleness, I want to emphasize the connection between gentleness and power, and harmlessness and defenselessness and power. And I want to read or go to a place in the text, page 31 in the text. And kind of this goes into a little bit of our relationship with power and our thoughts, and how, and then I want to talk about how it can relate to gentleness and harmlessness. So, Tristan, if you wouldn't mind reading paragraph 9 at the top of page 31 in the text.
Okay. Everyone, excuse me. Everyone experiences fear. Yet it would take very little right thinking to realize why fear occurs. Few appreciate the real power of the mind, and no one remains fully aware of it all the time. However, if you hope to spare yourself from fear, there are some things you must realize, and realize fully. The mind is very powerful and never loses its creative force. It never sleeps. Every instant it is creating. It is hard to recognize that thought and belief combine into a power surge that can literally move mountains. It appears at first glance that to believe such power about yourself is arrogant, but that is not the real reason you do not believe it. You prefer to believe that your thoughts cannot exert real influence because you are actually afraid of them. This may allay awareness of the guilt, but at the cost of perceiving the mind as impotent. If you believe that what you think is ineffectual, you may cease to be afraid of it, but you are hardly likely to respect it. There are no idle thoughts. All thinking produces form at some level.
So, I'm relating this paragraph to the idea of gentleness and this idea of harmlessness. And what it tells us, and I've experienced this for years, I have been afraid of the power of my own mind. And so I have depreciated the power of my mind in order to allay the fears that what this mind could do if it wasn't harmless and gentle. In order to be defenseless and harmless and gentle and not have any issues with that, we literally have to be invulnerable. We have to be all-powerful. We have to have the power of God within us. The idea of the misuse of that power is what, from an ego standpoint, becomes scary. Because now it turns into a potential attack and defend. And if I am invulnerable and that power is available to me and within me, then from an ego standpoint, oh my God, what am I going to do with this? What if I have a thought and it causes, you name it, do the butterfly effect thing if you'd like, somewhere else, or this or that? Or do I have to watch every thought I have? All of that stuff. Doesn't it boil down to eventually coming to a point of realizing what we are? And this is why to say we created ourselves is not just an ego statement. It's saying we were not created by love as love. If I'm created by love as love, I do not have to fear the power that I have. So if I know my identity as love, then gentleness and harmlessness are part of it. They are just characteristics of what I am. So anyway, I wanted to tie those things together as we look at this word gentleness, because Like everything else in the Course, it can go much deeper than our just normal thought of it might be.
Doesn't it somewhere in the Course say, who you are is love?
God is but love, and therefore so am I.
Yeah. God is but love, and therefore that's another. Yeah. So, our work, our play, is to begin to be willing to perceive ourselves as love in action. That's it.
Or love available, if you want to let the action come through us.
Yeah. Love available.
Okay, any other thoughts on gentleness?
Page 13 again?
Yep, page 13. So let's do joy. Roger, would you read that one?
Joy. Joy is the inevitable result of gentleness. Gentleness means that fear is now impossible. And what could come to interfere with joy? The open hands of gentleness are always filled. The gentle have no pain. They cannot suffer. Why would they not be joyous? They are sure they are beloved and must be saved. Joy goes with gentleness as surely as grief attends attack. God's teachers trust in him. And they are sure his teacher goes before them, making sure no harm can come to them. They hold his gifts and follow in his way, because God's voice directs them in all things. Joy is their song of thanks, and Christ looks down on them and thanks as well. His need of them is just as great as theirs of him. How joyous it is to share the purpose of salvation.
The gentle have no pain, they cannot suffer.
Why would they not be joyous?
God's teachers trust in him, and they are sure his teacher goes before them, making sure no harm can come to them. So that when I lose faith in my ability to be invulnerable, which is pretty much all the time, what I'm really required to have is faith that there is something available to me, within me, that is invulnerable. And that when I call to that, it will answer. And that's where my trust is. And if I can do that and come from that place, then the fear is gone, as you say, Nicole. It's just an experience that you haven't judged, because I'm not going to judge it. I'm turning it over to that which sees the whole picture and is the only place where judgment can occur. And what's the only judgment then that can occur in every situation?
It's either love or an expression, a call for love.
That's right. Or another way to say it is it's either truth or illusion. That's the only judgment that can be made. And my invulnerability is the Holy Spirit's invulnerability coming through me, that comes from that place of seeing the whole picture of what truth and illusion are and what love and a call for love are. Joy is their song of thanks. That kind of ties joy and appreciation together. And I think all of us who have had appreciation knows that it just feels good.
You know, going back to this book again, there's a part in there that says, I am loving myself. I am accepting myself. I am approving myself. I am valuing myself. I am appreciating myself. You sit down and say that, get quiet and relaxed and say that a few times and see how you feel.
Look in the mirror as you do it.
It's powerful.
Yeah.
Because it's not putting it off anywhere else. It says, I am right now choosing to see myself as loving, accepting, approving, valuing and appreciating.
Yeah, and that has to have positive results, even if we still consider ourselves to be a body.
Yeah.
It's still a much better place to be than condemning yourself as thinking you're a body.
Right.
It's a better body than we were before, really, in that sense.
And it's better for everybody.
I ain't got no body.
There's a sentence toward the end that's kind of interesting here. It says, and Christ looks down on them in thanks as well. His need of them is just as great as theirs of him. How joyous it is to share the purpose of salvation. How many of us have thought of that from the standpoint that Christ needs us just as much as we need Christ?
That's the big eye opener, isn't it?
Isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, and somewhere else in here it says, I need your help. And I'm thinking, he needs my help. But I'd see where it's coming from.
There's a simple statement here, and I marked it so I shouldn't have to look too hard. I thought I did anyway.
Among your other, 300 marks, too hard.
And it just says that God and his creations are completely dependent on each other. He depends on them because he created them perfect. He gave them his peace so they could not be shaken and could not be deceived. And then it goes on. And another spot that probably does it even a little better is fatherhood, and I marked what page that's on. This is one, let's go to, it's on text page 592. And it's the section, the chapter is The Undoing of Fear. And it's the section Reversing Cause and Effect.
Effect and cause.
Well, I just reversed it.
Yeah, right.
And Mary, if you would read that first paragraph.
13?
No, in the section Reversing Effect and Cause on the bottom of the page.
Reversing effect and cause. Without a cause, there can be no effects, and yet without effects, there is no cause. A cause is made by its effects. The Father is a father by his Son. Effects do not create their cause, but they establish its causation. Thus, the Son gives fatherhood to his Creator and receives the gift that he has given him. It is because he is God's Son that he must also be a father, who creates as God created him. The circle of creation has no end. Its starting and its ending are the same, but in itself it holds the universe of all creation, without beginning and without an end.
And then I'm just going to read the first couple sentences of the next paragraph. Fatherhood is creation. Love must be extended. So when it says, and Christ looks down on them in thanks as well, his need of them is just as great as theirs of him. How joyous it is to share the purpose of salvation. What we just read there, what Mary just read there, is how joyous it is to express creation itself. Without the Son, the Father cannot extend itself. Without us, Christ cannot extend itself.
Well, it's saying their creation is love extended.
Yes. So I just wanted to bring that part about, and it's appropriate, it should be in this section called joy. Because it's the joy of entire creation that it's talking about in these last couple sentences.
Pretty big.
So we won't go on anymore today with anything, but we can talk about anything we've covered so far. We've done honesty, tolerance, gentleness, and joy.
And the next section is defenselessness. So, and that to me, again, is that relaxation, just that open state of relaxation. And I've been listening to, what you've been saying and the different things that occur, in that open state, which is the state of, it's an absence of judgment and all of that. And to come back to the laundry thing, what's interesting about it, because it talks about harmlessness and then that thing of in my defenselessness, my safety lies. And in our defenselessness, we're totally harmless because we're not feeling attacked. We're not engaged in any of that at all. And it's even absent from awareness. And so to look at the laundry thing, it's interesting because it's occurred to me that, because, and I've witnessed so many incidents where then there can be a spiritual attitude of then seeing, that these people are judging, say, and then judging them for judging, and feeling like, don't bring down my vibe, you judgmental people, right?
Yeah.
But when there's no judgment happening at all, you just continue listening and being present. I was having a great conversation with the neighbors. So what I found out, what was amazing was that, because it didn't occur to me until I brought it up to Sharon Group to even think of them as judging, right? And so they kept telling me things then about the laundromat. So I learned, they both described to me with perfect detail, kind of hair, everything, the laundry thief, and don't ever leave your laundry when this person's in there. They described exactly what she looks like. They described to me, both of them individually had seen her at different times and described the same person. They told me details about the machines lock, the washers lock once you close them, so nobody can come and open them, but the dryers do not. So don't ever leave when you put your clothes in the dryer. So I walked, thank you so much, So I walked away from that like,
Full of knowledge.
those nice people, I really know, now I'm ready. I'm really ready.
They tell you
But
to remove your clothes before.
So cute. But it's just, and until discussing it here in group, it's like upon reflection, it's like, so that's how things just take place like that, in a state of just that openness and that relaxation, when they could happen so differently.
So isn't that a perfect example how judging stops your mind in its tracks? Because if you had been sitting there judging them,
For judging.
the conversation would have.
Oh, it would have been totally different.
It would have probably ended and stopped right there in the judgment instead of just receiving information.
Yeah. It probably would have gone very differently, And I can't say exactly what that would have been because it's not what happened, but it's just interesting to see that difference of when there's no, and really not looking at them as doing anything wrong or spiritually wrong, or you know what I mean? Like that wasn't even there.
But that's what a perfect example of doing what the Course is asking us to do and seeing a potential negative situation turn into a positive situation.
And that's the harmlessness. Because if we then come in and be spiritually self-righteous and judge the judgers, now we're doing harm. We're no longer defenseless.
That's the key right there too. Is we think from an ego standpoint quite often, we know what is harmful and what isn't. And that's where we get in trouble. What is the kind of thing?
That's what makes the judgments happen.
Patty and I were talking about this sort of thing the other morning about you're helping out the dog, thinking it was the right thing to do. If we don't ask or exist in a miracle readiness state of mind, so we're not constantly asking to be shown, we're going to automatically find ourselves judging what is harmful and what isn't. What is acceptable and what isn't is the first stage. If we can then start to accept it all and be from that standpoint, then all we have to do is make sure we're sending it where it belongs and not changing what we've accepted as now we're judging it. It's a two-step process. But that miracle readiness is just, and that's why it's good in chapter 30 where it says, decision steps for decision. What kind of day do you want to have? Decide what kind of day you want to have. If I make no decisions by myself, this is the day that will be given me. And then make that, if it's peace, if it's sharing, if it's miracle, whatever that is, then just be open to that as miracle readiness all day. And we don't have to ask ourselves, now what in this situation? Now what in this situation? It's just being open to that idea of connected to something other than our ego, much, much bigger than our ego at all times. Then these kind of things start happening, where we find all of a sudden it was unlike what it used to be. It's not the same anymore.
It's the way I look at it and practice it. It's not living as Jim, living as love. Not living as Jim, living as acceptance. In other words, taking the personality of me out of it. Then it's amazing how beautiful. I can't even get a good word to describe how wonderful it is to live as the qualities of love. And love has a lot of qualities. But pick any one. Joy, peace, harmony, acceptance, happiness. Live as that rather than as that person.
And when we get rid of the idea of guilt, then we're worthy to live that way.